It's so nice to be at an event with real people instead of looking at a screen, although I understand there are people at home looking at a screen. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight to hear this important, I think, and I'm sure very interesting program. Our speaker is Gabriele Mayer. She's originally from Germany. She did a PhD there in biology, and then she came to the US to do a postdoc and apparently fell in love and met her husband and ended up staying here. So she's lived in Missouri, she's lived in Illinois in the last 16 years. She's lived in Michigan, where she taught cell biology at Lansing Community College. She's a facilitator for advanced directives, and if you don't know what that is, you should, and you should have them, and other people in your family should have them. This enables people to express their wishes to people who can then take care of them and be the channel for those wishes at such a time as they become incapacitated. She's taken workshops to become a death doula, which sounds fascinating. So doulas help, they're sort of like midwives, they help usher in people into life, and so I assume that a death doula is helping the transition at the end of life. And currently she's on the Williamston Cemetery Board. So thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak to us tonight about green burial.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everybody coming out tonight. Yes, I heard there were 17 people coming, so I guess there's a lot of interest in burial options, and I'm happy to share with you what I learned. In 2012, my dad died, and the days around his death, my family really came together. After his death, it was just an incredible, moving event to witness how my family helped my dad through this transition. And then my mom insisted that his body stays home for an entire day so we could all say goodbye to him before it was taken away. So all of this really left a lasting impression on me. So in the years following, I just wanted to educate myself more about death and death care in this country. My dad died in Germany. It's a little bit different there. So I thought, if I want specific things happening to my body when I die, I need to learn about this. So you heard what I did to, I became the advanced directive facilitator. I also took a workshop in funeral homes. And then I started looking into options for burial. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So I'll spend a few minutes on telling you what do we call a traditional burial, and then we'll talk about natural burial. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on that. Then we'll talk about cremation and aquamation. Some of you may be familiar with what that is, but I'll explain. We'll talk about natural organic reduction or human composting. That's a really hip topic right now. You can't believe how many people sent me links to this when they heard I was giving this talk. So just not forget about that. And then I'm also going to mention body donations. There will be plenty of time at the end to ask questions, so please ask questions. There's some paper here that we can just give around if somebody wants to take some notes, and will be perfect. So, traditional burials. This is a beautiful cemetery. And I just want to tell you what we understand as traditional burial. And first of all, I have to say what traditional burial has only been fashionable, if you want to say that, for about 100 years. At the beginning of the 20th century, funeral homes became more common. People used funeral homes for their dead loved ones. And also the first vaults were used about 100 years ago. Interestingly enough, the very first vault was made by a cement factory. They just wanted to add an additional line of items that they sold. And they told cemeteries, you know, here is something that makes maintenance so much easier. So, and here we are, stuck with the vault. So I want to just bring up one number, and there are many more. So if you consider in 2019, there were 2.85 million deaths in the United States. And I chose a number before the pandemic because the pandemic really skewed this number. So if you take 2.85 million deaths, cremation has now taken over the traditional funerals, and let's just take 1 million deaths as a number of people who were buried in the traditional way, okay? So you need about 1 gallon of embalming fluid per 50 pounds of body. So let's just say the average dead person weighs about 100 pounds. You need 2 gallons of embalming fluid per dead body. And if we have 1 million deaths, every year 2 million gallons of embalming fluid are buried in our traditional cemeteries. That's a big number, I think. And the vault will not prevent the embalming fluid from staying in the vault. Eventually it will probably start leaking. I'm not saying that no vault will ever not leak, but there's a big risk. So we have 2 million gallons of embalming fluid, and then you add a casket that's either made of hardwood or stainless steel or copper or bronze, and that's put into a vault that's cement or plastic or stainless steel or metal. So you can imagine thousands of tons of other material gets buried in our traditional cemeteries. Okay? And it looks beautiful on the outside. So that's why people are saying we need alternatives to this. So again, here's our traditional setup. We have the casket within the vault. And I have to say, the vault is only there to make maintenance at the cemetery easier, so that you can easily mow over the graves. Because eventually, if you just have a coffin, there may be some decomposition happening, and the coffin may sort of deteriorate, and the soil may sink down a little bit, and then the ground is a little bit uneven, and that makes it a little bit more uncomfortable to mow there, may not look so pristine, so the vault will prevent all of this. That's the only reason. Okay? So in a green burial, the first thing that is very obvious is that the body is not buried as deeply. So if we say the typical burial is 6 feet under, in a green burial the body is about 3.5 to 4 feet under. The reason is that air, oxygen, can get to the body, and that will help to break down the body very gently. The microorganisms that are in and on our body will easily break down the body, and it is way, way easier if there is a lot of air available. And if you say to me, what about animals? It has been proven that no animal has ever dug up a body that has been buried at least 3.5 feet under the ground. The body is also not embalmed in a green burial setting, and it is either wrapped in a shroud or it's in some kind of a biodegradable container. It can be a cardboard box, it can be a pine box. I found one funeral home, they actually have pine beetle caskets. So, you know, there is some pine disease that is caused by a beetle, so these pine trees die and they turn them into a casket that makes them extra green. Or you can have a wicker basket, or you can have a felted casket. All of this is allowed as long as it is biodegradable. Okay? So that's the setup. It's actually pretty simple. So, when I became interested in green burial, I looked where there were cemeteries in Michigan available, close to here. And I found out there's one in Waterford, Michigan. It's called the All Saints Cemetery. And their green burial cart, because it's a hybrid cemetery, is called the Preserve. So I went and visited it, and it is lovely. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a prairie setting. It has a nice view over the countryside. It is very serene, and it was just really great to go there. So I came back and I thought, Waterford, that's still a little bit far away from here. So I'll see if I can find something a little bit closer. And I looked at local cemeteries, and I thought Mount Hope Cemetery would be great. It's a beautiful cemetery, and it looked to me like it has some extra space there. So I thought, So I contacted the Parks and Recreation Department because they oversee the cemeteries in Lansing. And I contacted them more than 2 times, and I never heard anything back. So that was that. And since I live in Williamstown Township, I thought, I'll just call and see what they have to say. So Wanda Blomquist, she is here tonight. She is the Williamstown Township Supervisor. And when I contacted her, it was this lucky coincidence because Wanda said, well, we already have a green cemetery plan in our long-term cemetery plan for the Beeman the Summit Cemetery on Beeman Road, but it's just on paper. Nothing has ever happened. So I can be quite nudging. And so I invited Wanda to come, and we went together back to Waterford. And Wanda was just as impressed as I was, I think, with the cemetery. We met with the cemetery director, who was really helpful. And so when we came back, we have worked really hard over the last years with the Williamston board, the Williamston, the township cemetery, the board with the cemetery board, and then Wanda and I. And I am so proud to say that the Summit Cemetery will have a green option. It's going to look beautiful when it's all done. But I think this year we can finally sell some plots. It is going to be available to residents and non-residents. And we modeled it quite a bit after the preserve in Waterford. So it's going to be a prairie setting. It's going to be planted in the spring. We're going to have some shrubbery that separates it from the traditional cemetery part. So again, it's going to be a hybrid cemetery. And there will be some trees. We're going to have a scattering garden, so we will accept cremains. The individual graves are not going to be marked, but we're going to have a shepherd's wall where names can be engraved, so loved ones don't get forgotten. And if there are any more specific questions afterwards, Wanda and I can answer them. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this because it's so close. Now, if you say, well, what else is there available? We do have some more. And I just listed the ones sort of in our area, just so you get a little bit of a sense. So there are some available. Some of them are public. Some of them are private. And here's a Catholic one. You have to be Catholic to be buried there. Somebody already sent a question, what about Petoskey? I'm trying to answer the questions that were submitted ahead of time, sort of as we go. So the closest to Petoskey, there is one in Traverse City. It's very interesting. There are 4 in the Houghton area. I think there must just be somebody driving force in Houghton to just get the green cemeteries going there. It's just amazing to me. So, and this is actually a picture of the actual preserve, and I just gave that. If you ever want to go on an outing on a weekend, I mean, it's about an hour drive, but it's really, really lovely. So we are hoping we'll get ours going soon. Oh, and by the way, if you are a landscaper or you know somebody, so we need people we need actually a landscaping company who are going to plant our trees and shrubs, and if you want to bid on that, we would love it, wouldn't we, Wanda?
Yes.
Okay, so now we have a cemetery for our body, and there were lots and lots of questions. Well, which of the funeral homes in the area will provide the service, right? So, again, when I started this, I called every single funeral home in the area, and, well, I didn't call them, I contacted them. And then some of them contacted me back, not all, and not everybody was totally in favor of this. So several were, no question. One funeral director said to me, well, if the body is not embalmed, it doesn't look so good, and that reflects negatively on the funeral home. All right, so that was that a couple of years ago. So in November, when I knew I was going to give this talk, I thought I'll just contact them all again and see what I hear back. And again, of those that contacted me back, every single one was supportive of this. And I want to make clear, it's a decision of the funeral home if they want to provide help to you to do this. You know, there is not like a state law that they have to go through. It is basically between you and the funeral home to negotiate this. And actually, one funeral director said to me, I'm so glad that this is coming. We need to get away from the embalming. The embalming fluid is not healthy for people who do the embalming. Several said, we're so glad to finally have a cemetery close by, because even though we have several further away, every time you have to move the body, then you acquire costs, right? So funeral homes are coming along. It is just a matter of consumers asking about this. And it is not the best idea to wait until you have a dead body laying there, and then you are saying, oh my God, now where do we go and who do we call and all of this. So I'm going to stress again and again tonight, pre-plan. Particularly if you want to have something like a green burial. Pre-plan. And I'll talk a little more about that now.
I wonder if you could go back one slide to catch the cemeteries that...
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to actually send you a link. And I tell you, well, you know what? I'm not giving it to you, but I will give you actually a website where you can look up, like if you spend a lot of time in Florida, you know, where could you be buried there? And so you can look up areas. There is the Green Burial Council, and they also will link you to a cemetery site. Not every cemetery is certified. It's like organic food. You have to pay for this, so we are in ones that we're not going to be certified, but we definitely are going to be a green cemetery. So. Okay, so the funeral homes, again, there is no law, federal law, state law, that a body has to be embalmed. Okay? So you can always say to the funeral home, even if you're going to have a traditional burial, you don't want to have the embalming process. They may say to you, well, then you can't have a public viewing. Okay? But you may say to them, well, what about if 10 family members come? And they may say, well, 9 is okay, 10 is too many, something like that. Yeah. But you can negotiate with them. Again, it's just all a matter of, we need to ask these questions. And it is really a misconception to think that everybody has to be embalmed. And the embalming is only there to make you look good during the viewing. It will not prevent the body from decomposing. That's a misconception too. Okay? All right. So the other one is, can I be buried without a coffin, without a vault? Again, that's all. You need to talk to them. So in the traditional Jewish funeral tradition, the body is often put in a shroud or in a biodegradable coffin. I have seen beautiful pine caskets being used. And then even at a traditional cemetery like at Mount Hope, the coffin will be placed directly onto the soil, and then the vault will be used without a lid and will be put upside down. So it will give the cemetery the protection from the top, but the body itself in the shroud or in the coffin is in direct contact with the soil. So that's sort of, you know, if that's all you have, it's better than nothing, right? So again, it's good to just talk to them. And if you already have a plot in a traditional cemetery, again, if you say, okay, I have this plot, the family paid a lot of money for it. If you say, okay, I don't want to have the embalming, I don't want to have a metal sealed casket, but I'm going for the pine box. That's already a big step towards being a little bit more environmentally friendly.
Is there a law that you have to have a coffin?
No. No. There's no law for that. No law for vault, coffin, or embalming. Okay. Most people these days are being cremated. And this morning I was at the dentist, and for some reason we started talking about this, and somebody in the office said, well, I'm going to get cremated. Period. Done with. So cremation has really become extremely popular since the 1980s, where it was about 10% of all the funerals. Now it's more than 50%. So it really has come a long way. And it was really convenient for a long time, but now, again, since we're becoming a little bit more environmentally aware, people are saying, are there better options? And this is actually for pets, but ignore this because it's exactly the same. And I liked that it was sort of right next to each other on this slide. So what are we talking about here? So in cremation, you know what happens. The body is taken, it's put into some kind of a container. It has to be in some kind of a box just to make it dignified at the crematory to handle the body. And then the body is put into relatively high temperature. The mercury in our teeth evaporates. There is a law in the United States that crematories have to have filters in the chimneys. I'm not sure how much that is really enforced, but the law is there. So there shouldn't be any exhaust. But nevertheless, and that's a concern. And then you use a lot of energy to burn a body, about as much as going on a car ride for 500 to 1,000 miles. People say, so what, 2 tanks full of energy if you want to. And then at the end, the ashes are collected and given back to the family. And in aquamation, the body is put into a pressurized vessel in water, about 400 gallons. Those numbers can be all over the place, I learned as I was reading all about this. But it's put into water with a lye solution, so it's an alkaline environment, and the vessel is heated up, and in about 4 to 12 hours, all the organic tissue totally dissolves. So when you open the vessel, there's only the bones are left. The liquid can be used, can be drained, or it can be used in a garden, can be used in a park to nurture the ground. And then the bones, just like in cremation, are ground up and then returned to the family. And you get actually more ashes. It seems to be an important point in everything I read. You get more ashes back because the smaller bones, they can totally burn up in cremation, but then of course in aquamation, every single bone will be there, and the bones are whiter when you ground them up. So it is much, much gentler. I have read numbers between 1/7 and 1/20 of the energy that is used in cremation is used for aquamation. Legality. It's legal now in more than 20 states in the United States. Quite a few are working on it. In Michigan, I found 2 sites, they say it's legal. I found some sites where it wasn't listed, although the site was updated in December. So on NOLO, which is a legal site, it is, they say Michigan is legal. But I haven't found a single funeral home that offers it. So I called a few, and they just are like, really, it's legal? So, but this costs a bit to buy this machinery, you can imagine. So again, if there's no demand, why should anybody invest in this? In Michigan, funeral homes cannot run their own crematories. Every state has their own funeral laws. So It has to be maybe a crematory that says we're going to add this to our line of service and hope that people will come, and maybe that will happen eventually. But funeral homes themselves, if they can't run crematories, I'm not sure if they will be able to do aquamation, but that's up to the legislature.
Could you, so you have 400 gallons of some liquid that's
It's
got-
like a bathtub.
like, but it's got lye in it,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna flush
Yeah,
that?
because, yeah, exactly, because there's enough, they use enough water that it will dissolve.
So there's
That's
not a
fine.
negative environmental impact?
No, no, it's gonna be, it's okay, yeah. And it is actually legal for pets everywhere, so. But again, so the closest state that is to us, the two closest, so there's Illinois and there's Ohio. So if you think that this is absolutely the way to go for me, you can arrange this. Again, every time you have to transport the body, that adds some cost. And in Michigan, again, Michigan is sort of the only one that, and there are a lot of that when it comes to funeral, the only one that. And it's Michigan, in Michigan, a funeral director has to supervise the disposition of the body. And there's, I think, a lot of interpretation possibilities there. So many people say the funeral director has to transport the body. That's not necessarily correct, but they have to be sort of present and then accept the body at the funeral, at the cemetery. So it's not, you get into a lot of, well, what does it really mean? So let's say you really want to be cremated, or you just, it's probably the least expensive, I have to say that. So if that's your option, I mean, nobody is shaming you on that. But then there are some ways that people sort of you can do better things with your cremains than having them buried in a traditional cemetery with a vault. Because believe me, even urns in many cemeteries need a vault. Even if it's a metal urn, like what's caving in there. But you know what? People want to make money. So you can have your cremains with concrete, mixed with concrete, and help build like coral reefs. Okay, that's one option that makes it a little greener. You can buy specific urns that have a tree seed in it, so then out of your ashes grows a tree. I'm not quite sure why you couldn't just bury the ashes close to a tree, or bury the ashes and plant a tree. But you know, I mean, it's cute, right? People spend a lot of money on funerals, so you know, if you market it, people will buy it. And then you can scatter the ashes. You can scatter them in a lot of different places. And yes, you can scatter them in national parks. If you are a law-abiding citizen, you will get a permit to do so. If you are not quite as law-abiding, you just do it and don't make a big fuss about it. Its ashes are not considered biohazard material. They're totally clean. They're not dangerous to the environment, so nobody is going to fine you because, you know, just be discreet about it. You can scatter them in water. You can even scatter them from an airplane. That's totally legal. You just can't scatter the urn. So you are not allowed to drop the urn. Yes.
Does that vary from state to state? I moved here from South Carolina, and you were not allowed to place ashes in water there.
Oh, really?
I'm a pastor, I'm a minister.
Okay.
And I got asked that all the time,
Okay.
and had to say no.
So again,
So-
okay, if it is specifically said by law, then by all means.
You had to go 12 miles offshore
Yes, that's true, if you, but yeah,
for the ocean.
for the ocean, that's
Yeah,
true,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But, I mean, ashes are okay for the environment. Okay, there's really no biohazard concern for that. It's a little bit different when you have a body on your hand, you know, you can just bury that everywhere.
Well, aren't ashes basically bone meal?
Yeah, Yeah,
So,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
why,
it's
I
what you
wait
use
for-
when you plant bulbs.
you can. You can absolutely do so, and every time the tulips bloom, you think of the loved one who helped the tulips bloom. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to get back to it. Yeah,
I helped a friend whose husband died a couple of years ago, and she used that system that you showed with the wooden container and so on. And their pitch was that there were trace minerals that you shouldn't just plonk in the soil and put the tree over it, because the trace minerals would not be healthy for the tree. Not poisonous for everybody, but not
Yeah.
healthy for
well,
the tree.
I mean, okay, so if you have the ashes, I would always recommend you mix it with some soil, right? Not just take the pure ashes. I mean, like when you use bone meal as a fertilizer, you sprinkle a little bit, right? You don't just plant the bulb in the bone meal and hope for the best. So yeah, there needs to be a little bit of dilution. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, so finally the human composting. You were all worried that I would miss it. So it started in 2019 in Washington, in Seattle. And this young lady, Katrina Spade, she was writing actually a dissertation. She is an architect, and she looked into, part of the dissertation was looking into different ways of what we can do with our dead. And she learned that for many, many, many years, human carcasses, animal carcasses have been disposed of by composting them. And so she developed a system to do this in a very dignified way. The body is placed on a bed of straw and wood chips and alfalfa, covered with the same, and then put into some kind of apparatus. And then the naturally occurring microorganisms will decompose the body, but they do this in a very controlled environment, so they add a lot of oxygen, and that helps break down the body. So it's not different in any way than when we just have a green burial, right? But in a green burial, you have the environment, you have the summers, the winters, the temperature changes, and so this goes way, way quicker. In 4 to 6 weeks, you have a pickup truckload full of mix of the wood and the alfalfa and the straw, and then what was the human body. And there may be some bones. They also will break down the bones. They may break down the bones and put this back into this container. And actually, Kathy Lovell's brother, who passed away last year, he underwent his body, setup in Denver. So, you want to say one word about it, or a sentence?
Well, his family thought it was a very positive experience. If you have questions, you can ask me.
Yeah, and so and then you can take the soil home, and if you want to. If not, they'll donate it to some kind of park. The families can use it for, again, planting a tree and use the soil. I think in Kathy Lovell's situation,
There
the
were some
friends.
fantastic flowers that grew out of that soil.
Yeah. And I heard a podcast just last week, and the gentleman had collected Japanese maple trees in pots. And so when he passed away, the family invited all the friends to take one of those Japanese maples and a bag of the soil and then plant the maple trees in the soil. I mean, you have beautiful soil on hand, and then you can use it for something. So this is not legal yet in Michigan. We're about now in 6, 7, 8 states. Some of them have already passed the law. Some of them are working on it. I think it's a beautiful option. It's very environmentally friendly. I think in rural areas where we have a lot of space still, I think this is expensive. Okay? So a green burial in the ground to me still makes a lot of sense. But if you think of a city, a big city, if you think New York, if you think Seattle, if you think Denver, I think it's a great option if you're running out of cemetery space, and there are issues with cemeteries coming up in terms of space and can we afford having them? So there's a lot of things going on with cemeteries. So I think it's good to have a lot of options. That's what I think. And everybody has to decide what works for them. So the last option is body donation. Is there anybody here who decided to, yeah, good, okay, yeah. I mean, that's actually happens way more often than I think. So again, we're in the fortunate situation, we're close to MSU. MSU has a body donation program. And then I also learned that we have, I don't know how new it is, but Northern Michigan University in Marquette, they have now a center for forensic anthropology, and they have a body farm. So you can donate your body to a body farm, but from here to Marquette, just think how many miles that would be in a horse. Yes, that would be expensive. So I think this is a wonderful option, and I think go for it. The only thing that I always tell people when we talk about funeral planning is, at the time of death, MSU and also Northern Michigan University and every place that takes bodies, they will make the decision if they'll take your body. So you always have to have a plan B. Last year, 2 of my friends whose mother died, they did not take the body. So if the body is too emaciated, if the body is too large, if the body is, you name it, if they don't need that body at that moment, they will say no. So you have to have another plan. You can't just assume that this is what's going to happen. Okay, so because if you want to make it easy for your family and then they say no, then you didn't make it easy for your family.
Yes. The bodies many times are used for student anatomy classes and so forth. So you need all the organs present.
That's true.
So if you've had multiple surgeries or things are missing, they would not be likely to want that body.
Yeah, that's true, that's absolutely. And also, if the body, if you are let's say you're undergoing some kind of horrible disease and you really, you don't eat for weeks at the end of your life and you really lose a lot of body weight, so just be aware and have another plan. Okay? And right now also MSU is not paying for the transportation. They lost that, whatever it is. She told me they were hoping to get it back this year, but there is going to be cost. And I called one funeral director and said, are you willing to transport the body to MSU and refrigerate the body if the death happens on a Friday? He said no. So again, you need to talk to the funeral homes when you have these plans, right? You don't want to have a surprise. So I'm going to end. You're almost done with me. Yeah.
What does MSU do with the body when they're done with it?
Oh, the bodies will be cremated. And then they have usually a very meaningful, beautiful service, I have heard, for, like, I don't know, once a year or however many times.
You can also, they will also give the cremains back to the family.
The cremains can go back, yeah. But I've heard that the students, I mean, it's a very dignified way to what you can do with your body, yeah.
That's how the medical universities do it. My husband was part of those, and they had a wonderful ceremony for them.
Yeah, yeah, they really do. I mean, I have heard nothing but good things, and it's really well organized. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Okay, again, out of the questions that were already submitted to Donna ahead of time, I'm going to answer them, and then I'm going to take yours. Okay. So, green burials. It's really up to the cemetery. There doesn't have to be, there's no state law. I mean, we had to undergo a health inspection, like, where's the water level? But otherwise, as I said, in Lansing, it's the Park and Recreation Department. In Williamstown Township, there's the cemetery board and the township board. So, yeah, there's no reason. Somebody asked about Delta Township Cemetery. Was that you?
No, but I did talk to the clerk, Mary
Clark, and she told me that the Prey Funeral Home in Charlotte was, so I talked to that guy. Mary said that there was an idea that they might take part of, we have 3 cemeteries, the Hillside, you already know this, and they're thinking about it, so.
Yeah, but it really is up to the cemetery. So if you have a cemetery in mind, I have a feeling that public cemeteries are a little easier than private ones. Maybe I'm wrong. But just talk to them and say, you know, I would love to come here, and I have 50 friends who would love to come here. And, you know, what are you doing for us? So that's important. How do you advocate for green burial in Lansing? Again, it's you and the funeral homes. It's you and calling the funeral homes. It's you and going to the funeral homes. It's you and going to the cemetery. Well, it really is true. I mean, here one person can make a huge difference. And I bet you if that Parks and Rec person in Lansing, if he had 50 emails of people saying, what about Mount Hope, that would have been, I would have gotten an answer, right? So it really, we can make a difference here, I'm sure. I'm totally sure. I'm going to give you in a minute this, this is so the federal funeral regulations is handled through the Federal Trade Commissions, the FTC, and they have a very helpful brochure called Shopping for Funeral Services. I would recommend everybody take it because it tells you what by law you need to have and what you don't. Right? You don't need to have embalming, it's all in this. And it's going to, they're going to add a fantastic provision this year. So I used to also belong to the National Consumers Advocacy Group for funerals in the United States and from Michigan. We advocated really many, many years. And so starting hopefully this year, all funeral homes have to put their prices online. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
I have gone, I mean, I have driven to every single funeral home in every county surrounding us here. If they wouldn't send me a price list, I drove to them and I picked up a price list because they have to give you a price list when you are in their door. They don't have to otherwise. I mean, it's sort of, it makes it really hard for consumers, right, to figure out how much this all costs. So if they all, and there are lots of them who have it now online, don't get me wrong, they're really coming along. But there's still some wrong, and this is going to be a new law, but this brochure is wonderful. Somebody said, how do I make my wishes known? So have an advance directive, absolutely. And you don't have to have a lawyer for that. It doesn't have to be notarized. You just have to have 2 people decide. I'm happy to help you. I don't charge for any of my services. I just love to talk about this. So contact me and I'll help you. Talk to your family. Okay? It's not helpful when grandma dies and then people start fighting over, did she want to be cremated? Well, we don't know. Was it a green funeral? Well, we don't know. What did she want? So it helps to tell your family what you want. Write it down somewhere. And at the next Thanksgiving dinner, just there is actually a website called Death Over Dinner, and they help you plan those talks at the dinner table. I have organized plenty of those, and believe me, people love to talk about it once you get them going. And then you can pre-plan with a funeral home. I totally encourage this. Go to them. If you know the funeral home you want to go to, that you want to use, go and discuss this all with them. And I bet you they want you as a customer. Okay? There are more funeral homes in the area than we need. So they want every single dead person's business that they can get. So talk to them. Don't prepay. That's the last advice I'm going to give you for tonight. The reason is, you may change your mind. You may have prepaid 10 years ago for a traditional funeral, and now after today you think, I really want aquamation. Well, then that doesn't work so well anymore, right? So instead of prepaying and giving the funeral home your $10,000, put them into an account that's called Pay Upon Death. make somebody the beneficiary who you think is going to be the perfect person to organize your funeral. And when you die, they can take this money and pay for your funeral, just like the funeral home would have taken your money and paid for it. But now, if you move to Florida and you don't need the funeral home in Michigan anymore, you can take your money to Florida and put it in a bank there. So it's your money, and you do not need to have this sitting here with any funeral home in this area, right? And it's nothing against the funeral homes. I'm not saying they don't treat your money well. It's just you have control over your money, because maybe something totally new comes up. And then again, you can always change your plans. But if you want your money back, you are not going to get it back 100%. That's for sure. Okay. All right. So here's my email address. I have one for only death things called Partners in Parting. I thought that was cute. Yes. Okay. Question.
So I'm wondering, what do you know in terms of body donations? Do the funeral homes know how to make those phone calls, or do you have to do that yourself of figuring out how to call who?
So what would happen is you go to the, let's take MSU. You go to the MSU website, you look at the body donation, you search for body donation, and you will get to their department, and you fill out a form that this is what you want to do. And then when death occurs, you call MSU. And in the past, then they would arrange for transportation, and they would take care of everything. And as I said right now, I think the lady's name is Lori, she said, we're hoping to get this back this year. Right now, the families have to pay for the transportation. And if the death happens, let's say on Friday, and MSU is closed until Monday, you need to do something with body, it needs to go somewhere. And so you need to also find a funeral home that's willing to transport the body to MSU and who have refrigeration. Yeah, just go ahead.
I'm registered with an organization called AGR, Anatomy Gift Registry. And they're based in Hanover, Maryland, but they will arrange transportation. But they were very emphatic about, don't call a funeral home. We have to be the very first call.
Yes.
Otherwise, everything is negated.
Yeah, no, if you do
and
body
so,
donation,
yeah.
the organization, and you do this ahead of time,
Yes.
right? I don't even know if you can just give somebody's body, or does it always have to be pre-death, and the person who is being donated has to make that decision himself? I'm not.
No, I think that it can be after the death.
So it can be
also,
the
but
next of kin.
I just chose to do it ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they will also.
When you get your driver's license, you can have on your license donation, body donation. So I have.
Oh,
a
body
little red
donation, not
corner.
just organ
Yeah,
donation.
when you go and renew your driver's license, that can be annotated on your driver's
Oh, I
license.
thought it was just organ donations. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, very good. Yeah, questions, yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment. There's thousands of people who die because they don't have the organ they need. I don't know how much of a need there is for older people who die, I mean, with condition, like your kidneys in or whatever. But on the back of your license, you should donate if you possibly can. It can save many lives.
Totally agree. I have it on mine, yes. I just didn't know that you can do body too. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we should, yeah, I mean, if we can save somebody else's life. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the bigger picture on your new project in Williamston, how many bodies will it hold?
About 880, we just said.
And is there like a time sequence where the first body in decomposes and then you could put another one in?
That's a great question, because we just talked about this at our cemetery meeting just a few days ago. So in Europe, you may know or may not know that one buys a grave, and then after 30 years, that grave can be rebought by the family, or somebody else will be buried in the same grave. And we're in green cemeteries in the country, that is definitely a possibility, and we are going to put it in the Williamston ordinance for ours too. And we may never need it, but we felt if there is a huge demand and we have the space, we may as well add it. Fewer people are using cemeteries, right? We're talking about a lot of alternatives. So in commercial cemeteries, you are guaranteed perpetual care, right? Because they have all these wonderful setups and it's going to go forever. Well, now fewer and fewer people are using cemeteries, so the revenue is sort of dying down a little bit. And I'm not saying this is happening tomorrow, but we're talking here what's going to happen in the future. So there are actually commercial companies, they're walking away from cemeteries because they can't take care of them anymore because they don't have the income, and so they're just abandoning them. So what are you going to do to them? So somebody, I mean, we want to acknowledge that there are people buried there, right? So somebody needs to step up. Is it the county? Is it the city? Is it the state? What's going to happen to them? So, these are sort of the maybe problems in the future. So I think, again, the green burial, where spots can be reused, to me that makes so much more sense.
There's a question in the chat about the relative cost of green burial versus traditional burial.
Yes, so we need to talk here about what's in our shopping for funeral services in the rules. So every funeral home has to give you an option that's called immediate burial or direct cremation. And that is quite inexpensive. Direct cremation can be under $1,000 if you think what a traditional funeral costs. That's right. And what that means is that in the event of death, and that is for the entire country, has to be in there. They have to give you that price. So what that means is, in the case of death, the body is collected, and it's either taken right away to the crematory, or taken to the funeral home, but there's no viewing, no interaction with you and your loved one. It's just stored there until a grave is prepared, and then there is a burial. So it's a very fast process. You don't have to pay the overhead that every single funeral home will charge you as soon as the body comes into the door, but that's not part of this direct cremation. So that can be relatively inexpensive, and I actually asked some of the funeral directors who called me back how this would work with the green burial. So if you wanted to, you could say, I want to have a immediate burial, so then they will just take the body, it's not going to be embalmed, it's whatever container or method you use to shroud the body, and they will store the body, and then as soon as the grave is prepared, it will be buried. And that would be the price for immediate burial, okay, or direct cremation. Otherwise, you just have to look through their list. So it will cost whatever they charge you to take the body. Let's say you want to have a viewing with the immediate family at the funeral home. They'll charge you for that. You have to sort of look into that. You can keep the body at home. I know this is not everybody's sort of, oh, that's really what we want to do, but you have the legal right to do this, and then have the body taken from your home to the cemetery, and you can wash the body, you can dress the body, you can do all of these things. But again, there are people who love diving into these things, and other people are like, oh my God, no. So there is a role for funeral directors, there's no question about it. And you just choose what you want. Don't go for the packages, go for a la carte, and choose, I don't want the embalming, but I want this. I don't want this, but I want this. Look carefully. You can bring the price down, that's for sure. Yeah.
So I just had a really good friend die in his home a couple weeks ago, and Meridian Township had to come out and do all of their checks and balances and stuff, and so, or all of their whatever, to make sure that that it was a legit death, whatever. So where does that play into that though?
Yeah, so the easiest is when you die, if you die under hospice care, because then the hospice nurse can just declare the death, and the body, wherever the body is, there is no questioning about that this was a suspicious death, right? Not everybody dies in those circumstances. If it's a young person, or if it's somebody who, you know, your partner doesn't wake up in the morning and is laying dead next to you, there will be some kind of inquiry. Probably the coroner will have to do an autopsy to make sure that there was no foul play. So that would mean, let's say you want a home funeral, right? It would mean the body would have to be transported with the funeral director to the place of the autopsy. Then you would, if you want the body at home, you would have to take the body back, and then it's probably after several days, so that may not be a very good option. So it's always the easiest is the body, if the death occurs under more natural circumstances. Otherwise, the home funeral may not always be an option that's feasible. Yeah, okay.
You said that the human composting option was pretty pricey. What kind of price range are you talking?
Well, I looked at the one in Denver, that was $10,000. But they are also a very holistic funeral home. So they have an option where you come in and you help to oil the body and dress the body. It's a very beautiful option that it's very holistic, but you pay for all of this, right? So if you say, no, I decline all of this, I just want to have the body, you know, put in the vessel. I read that there's like $5,500, $6,500. The people in Seattle, I mean, they'll take any body. So you can have your body flown to Seattle. You know, I mean, it's available if you think that's what you absolutely want.
Sorry, I came in late. One reason I came was to find out about the human composting, but I was wondering, did you explain how the less energy involved with human composting? Did you get into that?
Oh, yeah. Way less energy. I mean, cremation is really the most energy, because you have to get that fire going to 2,000 plus degree Fahrenheit, right? So in human composting, they really don't heat the body. The organisms on and in our body will heat up. If anybody has ever maintained a compost pile, you know that organic material breaks down, it makes the compost pile really warm. The same thing happens when our bodies break down. And I don't think that's a bad thing, that's what bodies are meant to do. You know, we are supposed to go back to the soil and become part of the soil again. So, so what they do in these vessels is they monitor the oxygen flow. But that's really all that is. And everything happens automatically. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's been enlightening in many ways, and not one that a lot of people like to talk about. So I'm very glad that you did this and sharing how much energy you have put into learning all these things. My question is, does a natural burial have to take place in a cemetery? Are there other options?
Yes. So if you have a big enough property, and you can go with easement requirements and all this, I think it's at least an acre. You can bury somebody on your own property. It's just not very feasible. I mean, you can't do it in your backyard. So, right. No, it doesn't have to be in a cemetery. But if it is out of your private land, no, we have cemeteries or private land. We don't have.
Is that a state or a local ordinance that controls that? Do you know?
I have never heard. I mean, what else would it be? Like, what do you have in mind?
Local zoning ordinance?
Yeah, no, but I mean, if it's not a cemetery and not your private backyard, where would you take the body?
No, I was thinking private property.
Yeah, you can do it on your private property, but it has to be big enough, and there is a size at least so big. And then you also usually have the health inspection for like where sort of the runoff is and the water level and that. Yes?
Yes. All the possibilities so far are associated with an established cemetery. there is a natural green burial site near Newaygo, which will be up and running this summer. And it's in the Manistee National Forest, also by the Newaygo Prairie Natural Sanctuary. And there's two individuals that are setting this up. They have a large plot, and they are just going through the governmental bureaucracy process of getting it okayed, but it should be ready to go by the summer. So if you're not...
Is that like a conservation cemetery? Is that what they call it?
They're just calling it MI burial.
Well, you know, I mean, that's a really, thank you very much, that's a good point. So for example, our church has 10 acres. So we could start, we could say, we're setting aside part of this as a burial ground. This is what...
20 acres.
You can have your private cemetery, but you have to have the ground, and then in a way you have a cemetery again, right? Because that's what we call it, where the people are buried. If there's more than one, then probably at some point you call it a cemetery. But yeah, anybody can start a cemetery. You just have to make sure you're far away from your neighbors, your land is big enough, and you have the health department come and give you the okay. But yeah, you can do this. And there's, in addition to the typical green burial cemeteries, there's something called conservation cemeteries. It's sort of nature conservancy, means green burial ground. So they use some of their burial fees and money from donors, and in addition to having the burial grounds, they acquire extra land, they do restorations. So it's basically like the nature conservancy. And I'll send out the link to this. There are only, I think, less than 10 in the United States, if not less than 5. And there are 2 in Ohio, there's none in Michigan so far. So that's, I didn't talk about it because again, it's far away, yeah.
How close can you put these bodies? What if you had a family and you wanted just like as close as possible, put the bodies one? How close?
Well, the cemetery, so there are, I mean, our sexton will tell you that, there needs to be some space in between the graves. So let's say one person dies and then the next person is buried like less than 6 months later, there needs to be sort of some space in between the bodies. So our graves are going to be 4.5 feet. That's what we just decided, and then the next grave is 4.5 feet. So that there's, and Williamson will also allow you, if you have like one spouse is already buried in the traditional part, to have then if the next person who wants to be buried there once agreed, will allow that sort of mixing. We're not so strict anymore with the walls, I guess. Yeah.
I wondered if you've had any conversations with Muslims. My new dentist is a Muslim, and she told me this morning when I was telling her I was coming here that she has gone to funerals in Evergreen Cemetery where the body is taken out of the coffin and put in the ground. And yet you said that do they allow that at Evergreen? I tried to find out.
Yeah, that's.
Oh, they do, okay.
Yeah, it's just, you still have to have the vault, sort of like a butter dish, sort of upside down, so that from the top, you don't have the sinking of the ground. As I said, the vault is only there to have the cemetery for easier maintenance, for nothing else. So they will do that, yes.
So this is a question that is, it's not really about the burial, it's about the cemetery.
Yes.
It seems to me, we already have all these cemeteries. Whatever kind of burial happened there already happened. Can we do more to make the cemeteries more environmentally friendly? Why do we have this endless mowing? Can't we have more trees? This is, I feel like the cemeteries are being run for the convenience of the mowers.
Here. Wildflowers.
Yes.
I actually I supervise the staff for Evergreen, Mount Hope, and North Cemetery. So I'll tell you an antiquated system that exists, and basically what it is it isn't because of the mowers, it's because we have to have equipment. There's only 2 people do the burials. So we don't have 4 to 6 or 8 people that lift and carry everything. So it has to be to get the backhoe in. Now, later this year, we're supposed to get a more compact, smaller backhoe, and we think that we won't have to move 8 to 10 to 20 stones that weigh 250 or more pounds. So for the two guys doing that work, it's unbelievable. And if you've been to Evergreen Cemetery, we're lucky if there's a burial like this, because the guys have to put down 2 boards, I mean a board for this set of wheels, a board for that set of wheels, all the way through, and then back out. And we do the Muslim burials when they're inverted, that's what we call it. The butter dish, they do refer to it as that once in a while, but the family goes into the grave as well. Like people go in, and so we have to have ladders there for that. And then to make it safe for them to get in and get out. And also for us, it's 4 feet. And we only go down 5 feet. It isn't 6 foot like that show. And then we have collapsing conditions in section G in Evergreen Cemetery. So we have to be careful there. Sometimes we'll have to skip graves. So that's why sometimes you can't have somebody you might buy like a bunch of plots, but someone died, and if it's 6 months or if the ground is too soft, you can't put somebody right next to them.
Yeah.
All those little things. It's fascinating for me too. But I plant as many trees as I can, but if you plant a tree, you have to take up 4 to 8 burial spots for a tree. So I've stuffed them in wherever I can. So,
The trees, not the
Tree.
So as long as I'm there, there's gonna be lots more trees planted, but, you know, when I'm gone.
And I, you know what, I think we can probably do that. And again, we just need to come forward and say, well, we want to think. You had a question.
That's okay. I don't know if it's silly now, but I was just wondering, you know, it seems like when they unearth the plot, I guess they have to cut the side to make a hole in the ground anyway, so why can't there be something that just supports the top? Not worried about the wall.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, this is just how it has to evolve, you know. I mean, things happen and now we're changing a little bit and we're like, well, can we do it differently? I mean, it happens with anything, right? I mean, we're people of habit, and then all of a sudden something new comes along and now we're thinking, well, can we change a little bit? And so, again, I mean, everybody has to find their way of what they feel comfortable with and what they're willing to pay. And you know, talk to the cemetery where you want to go, talk to the funeral directors. I think there's a lot of wiggle room. It's just a matter of, don't just walk in and say, I need somebody that helps me bury my husband, and you have no clue. And, you know, I mean, many of them work on commission, and, you know, they need to live too. So, you know, it's a business. So you just need to be informed. And you know, people make a lot of inquiries before they buy a car, but, you know, it seems like we're not really that investigative when it comes to funerals, because nobody wants to think about it. But, you know, not everybody needs a car, but we all need to be buried. Okay, well, any more questions? Otherwise, I guess that's what I